Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
This is Millie Weaver for the Infowars Nightly News. Well, we have a very special guest, Professor Ellis Washington, who is an adjunct law professor who wrote a manifesto detailing his experiences being discriminated based on his political ideology. Let's go ahead and talk to Professor Ellis. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Ellis Washington. Well, you wrote this amazing and profound manifesto. Can you tell us more about your manifesto? And, you know, it is about ideological racism in the academic world. So can you go into that for us?
I'll be happy to. And Millie, thank you so much for having me on. And let me just say this at the onset, that you are the first media entity to interview me on this rather controversial law review article that I wrote 2 years ago. It really covers most of my professional career. I became a conservative during my senior year at DePaul University in Indiana in 1982 on Christmas, actually Christmas Day. I became a conservative, and from that point on, my life irrevocably changed. Before that, I was, a music major, played French horn, studying classical music. Everything was going real smooth. Didn't really face any overt discrimination. But once I made it known that I was a conservative, everything just turned upside down. So that started me on the route to write my manifesto. And so when I wrote it in 2015, I wanted to show not only my story, but talk about other uh, scholars that I studied under who were going through similar things. Some of them have even passed away now. It transcends race, it transcends religion, it transcends ideology, intellectual ability, and it's just this evil force of nature that permeates all of our institutions. And so I was like, man, how do I write about something that's so big but yet so amorphous, so invisible, so it just moves in and out of our institutions at will, just destroying lives. People that worked hard all their lives and tried to do things the right way, studied hard, went to the right schools, wrote books, published law review articles on this continent and many other continents, but still couldn't get positions in the university. And then I finally figured it out several years ago, Millie, that it's based on ideological discrimination,
Do you
a
feel
term
like
that
you
I've
are
coined.
more likely to be discriminated against in a university setting because of your ideological or religious conservative beliefs? Or do you think you are more likely to be discriminated against based on your skin color?
Wow, that's a very good question. I think it all, in a one kind of evil way, morphs together, where you can't determine, am I being discriminated based on my skin color, or am I being discriminated based on my conservative or Christian uh, ideological beliefs? And I addressed that question, and I appreciate you asking it. And in
Yes.
the article, my manifesto, I call it, and I think I coined this term, the Clarence Thomas effect. Clarence Thomas has been a 30-year intellectual mentor of mine. I've never met him. My son recently met him, and another great conservative icon, Professor Dr. Walter Williams, a professor of economics at George Mason, where my son went there his freshman year. And so I'm glad that my son at least got a chance to meet him in person. But I've been ideologically aligned with Clarence Thomas for 30 years now, going back to my years at Harvard University in the late 1980s. Incidentally, I was at Harvard Law School for a year at the same time that President Obama was there, although I have no independent recollection of him. But anyway, my point being, Millie, I think what I call the Clarence Thomas effect, or the fact that Clarence Thomas was able to get on the Supreme Court, the left made a blood oath amongst themselves and amongst all the institutions that they control, which is virtually everything, to not let a Clarence Thomas arise again. And you're seeing with the trouble that President Trump is having and getting his picks through, and just every step of the way is a living hell for this man, but yet he marches on. That's part of the Clarence Thomas effect. That's the empire striking back. That's the progressive left, the Marxist, progressive, communist left having a collective fit to literally kill in the cradle anybody brave enough to be a Clarence Thomas or follow after a Clarence Thomas, and they'll do everything and anything they can to kill their career, even in the cradle.
That's right. And you know, the left likes to say that they want diversity, but at the same time, all the studies out there show that in the universities, the left does not want diversity because the majority of professors there are liberals or other. I mean, very few identify as conservatives, which raises the question, are they being discriminated? And other studies out there have shown that there is a lot of discrimination based on your ideology, your political views. So that's one of the things that's pretty amazing about your manifesto. What are some of the things that you personally experienced at these universities from people?
Well, in the beginning of the manifesto, Millie, I was just trying to find it. The first part has an abstract, which is very important. This is a short paragraph, and I urge the readers to read that first because that just summarizes my story and it puts it in context. Because the article is admittedly, it's a deep scholarly treatise, and it covers a lot of history, a lot of different movements, both here in America, in Europe, and throughout the world. But I open up on the second page. It's titled "Breaking the Slave Chains of Affirmative Action," and I reprinted a letter, one of literally hundreds of letters that I've written to all of the law schools. At three different occasions, I wrote every law school in America seeking a job, a university job, and almost to the man, the ones that chose to respond to me, Millie, would say, Professor Washington, undoubtedly your credentials are impeccable. The schools you went to, your writings are magnificent, but we're sorry we don't have a position. And this is the key part that would fit your credentials. So that was a little subtle to me acknowledgement that I had the credentials, but because of ideological racism, ideological discrimination, intellectual discrimination, or another way to put it, liberal hegemony inside of the academy, I would not be allowed. And I said, that's terrible. But I don't have a big media company. I'm just one man. All I had was my writing. So I just kept writing over the decades, for over 3 decades now, Millie. I've been
Wow.
writing, and I've been just trying to, in silence, tell my story. And I just want to say this once again. I really appreciate you for giving me this opportunity. I just reached out to you earlier this week, and already
Yes.
I'm speaking to you. I've written literally, you think about all the big names. I won't name any here, but any big name, conservative, liberal, any media outlet, I would just go to Drudge Report and just go from A to Z, writing, pleading, trying to tell people my story. Nothing but silence, what I call the silence of the lambs. And I'm so grateful that you and
Well, thank you very
Alex
much.
Jones.
Yes,
Yes,
thank
thank you.
you. We're the people's media, so we're going to put it out there if it's something that's really going on. And can you just tell the viewers the name of your manifesto and your websites and other information that you want to get out there to them?
Sure. Originally, it was just called Manifesto, and I hope this is not going to get you in trouble with the
No.
FCC. That the title that I use, and this was based on a conversation from a friend, a former colleague of mine at Savannah State University named Lenny McCoy. He said, Ellis, you need to do something to give a little bit more of an edge to your writing to bring more attention to it. So I said, instead of calling it Manifesto, I'm going to call it Nigger Manifesto. And the full title is Nigger Manifesto: Institutional, Intellectual, and Ideological Racism inside the academy. And if anybody wants to find it, they could just Google Ellis Washington Manifesto or Nigger Manifesto, or you can go to my history blog at elliswashingtonreport.com, where I have thousands of my writings covering, like I said, a 30+ year period.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Ellis. It has been amazing talking to you on here. And I really do suggest for viewers to go and read his manifesto. It's very enlightening because the studies are out there. You know, there's a lot of discrimination going on at universities regarding your political affiliation. We've seen it with how Milo Yiannopoulos can't even throw a speaking event there. So thank you so much, Ellis. And this is Millie Weaver with the Infowars Nightly News.